I'll just quickly go through first. Okay, so before going into Nagios, the very first thing what we need to know is what is monitoring. And as I said, as part of DevOps engineering or in a company, why is that monitoring is very.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay, so I was saying, the very first thing, if you take in a company, the servers which you're using has to be always available. So in that terms, we simply use a word called high availability, which in turn means that any kind of server that you're trying to work on should always be accessible and you should be able to work in it. Right? So in that case, high availability is the very first thing, no matter who is maintaining or managing the service. Okay, and the second thing is whenever something goes wrong, what will we do? We actually have to wait until things get fixed. So we again technically call this word as downtime. So which is nothing but the time we take until we fix all the problems and bring back the service to the normal condition. Okay, so that is one of the big problem because suddenly when we don't know what is happening and suddenly we get a call saying from a user that this is not working, that is not working, and after that we go there, we try to see, okay, this is the problem, then we stop all our services saying that this is not working, we need some time to fix. So we take more and more time because only after people start referring with the problems that we have, then we will be proceeding with checking the problem. So we need a lot of time. So in that case, the downtime that has been incurred in fixing the problems will be more. Okay. And
Okay, one
obvious,
more thing. That
Mhm.
your session is not a recording, I think so.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So please continue.
Yeah, yeah. So if you take in this part, you are actually adding the redundancy to the system. So which says that you're trying to do something which is repeatable again and again, right? So this kind of problems happens wherein if you don't try to see or forecast that the problem can happen, then you're going to spend so much of time in repeating the same tasks again and again, right? And also, when I say monitoring the server, it is not only that the servers can be physical, you can also have virtual servers or virtual machines. So this is the problem wherein why we need monitoring in any kind of system or in a product. So you have to ensure that the servers are always highly available and at any point of time the amount of time that is incurred in bringing up the problems and bringing up the server, sorry, not bringing up the problem, fixing the problems and bringing up the server should always be less so that we can always forecast saying that, okay, I think this server has this problem and this night we cause some other problem. So you try to fix it at an earlier stage. And mainly, no matter what kind of servers that you're using, that is either can be a physical server or it can be a virtual machine, we should be able to find the problems and fix them so that the high availability is always present with any kind of server groups or data centers what you're using. So in that case, now when I say how you can do monitoring, monitoring can be done in several ways. So one of the very uh, first thing which a system administrator or a ops engineer would do is write their own script or tool. So you can write some scripts which will periodically go to that server, try to fetch the data what you have, and then get it back to you. But the problem here is, first thing is you need to write scripts which is specific to the server and which is specific to check. And then you need to write a script to first connect to it, and you have to write some kind of checks specifically for specific platform. And then you need to write a check to store it in some kind of database. Okay, after all this is done, then again you need to write some kind of front-end dashboard on which you can view all this detail. So like this, for every small thing, you have to keep on writing some own tools or own scripts, which is going to be very huge. And modification on each one of them is going to take a long time. So instead of that, in the market currently, there are so many open source tools and there are so many enterprise tools. Then by using them, you have a lot of features which can help us in reducing the time in configuring it. 1 minute. The problem will be is that if you try to write your server, sorry, your own script, then you have to write your script first to do different checks based on different platforms or different operating systems, and then you have to do checks with respect to different kind of connectivity, and then you need to store those data. So for that, again, you have to write some script and maintain some separate database, and then you need to have a separate front end where you can see all this data, right? So just to write one monitoring setup or one monitoring tool, you need to have so many scripts, write a database, I mean, maintain a database, write some kind of front end. So you need to write it in PHP or JavaScript. So there are so many things involved just to maintain one server also. So in that case, going up with your own tool would be more time consuming. Okay, and also there's a lot of maintenance that you have to do. So that is when there are so many tools available in the market which can be used. So we have enterprise tools, and at the same time we have open source tools also. So if you ask me the tools, there are so many. So we have Nagios, we have Xenos, we have Surf, and Monet, Ganglia, like that. There are so many tools which is available in the market. Now, why specifically we are going to look into Nagios? If you see, Nagios is one of the oldest and the latest also, because there are so many changes that has been done to Nagios, and it's so stable. And also, it's one of the tool which has been widely used in the industry, which has so many features, because this has a lot of ability wherein whatever that I was selling to you so far can be done. So if you see now, as a monitoring tool in Nagios, you can have checks specific to each server, and Nagios has default so many plugins which gives you the ability of different kind of checks for different platforms. So you don't have to keep on writing anything specific for a check, wherein you just use the check, try to configure that will go to a particular server and check whether a particular service or check is working or not, right? And at the same time, it has its own database to store all the data, so that no matter how many kind of servers that you're working, no matter how many kind of checks that you're doing in each of the server, it will always record the data so that you can use it for viewing it. And at the same time, there is a lot of ways wherein it is not just to monitor, because when you take Nagios as a infrastructure management tool, you can use it in two ways. That is, you can do monitoring, and at the same time you can do alerting, because it is not just enough for us to keep monitoring it, right? Because why do you need to monitor? We need to monitor to ensure that there is no problem, or if there is a problem, we always indicate us. So how do you indicate it? That is what the alerting part is. So for an alerting, there are so many ways which you can do, wherein you can use a dashboard which Nagios maintains by itself. So either you can use it wherein every time you want to see the status of the servers, you can go to the server on a particular place where you have put up this HTTP services, wherein you can see this dashboard, or you can have an option wherein you can send email or you can send SMSs. Specifically, in a company, we always use this email, so that since you'll always be checking your inbox for emails, you can quickly see that and you can get the notification of what is going wrong. So that is what the other part of infrastructure management, that is alerting. Because just by monitoring, it is not sufficient for us to know, because we have to be notified on what is the problem. So in that case, alerting is very important. And like I said, the number of services or the amount of checks that we can do are so many, wherein by default we can use a lot of existing plugins which Nagios give, so that we don't have to worry about how the check has to be done. Automatically, Nagios will take care of working on the service. Okay, and the next thing is, so it is nothing that you have to work on Nagios using only Linux or Unix based operating system, wherein you can always use Nagios also for Windows based services. So in that case, we have separate plugins and installation through which it works properly. Okay, so both it can used for Windows and Linux based systems. All right. So like I said, now Nagios has a separate database on its own. So any kind of data that you're trying to gather using Nagios can be stored into the database separately, which is present internally. Okay, so any point of time, if a company needs you to give a statistics or in general metrics on how many servers are there, how many servers are not working, what are the status of the server, so easily you can get the metrics of all these details using the database which Nagios uses internally to store. Okay, so finally, if you see, there are a lot of other features that you can do it in Nagios, because when I say you are sending emails, so you don't have to literally send emails only to one person. So based on the conditions or based on the kind of services that you're checking, you can create groups and you can send specifically to a particular group or a particular individual based on services. So that is the biggest advantage what we have, because if you're writing some scripts, again the problem is that you have to do it everything manually. All right, and once again from the management, if you take, they are always interested in the reports, so they will ask, can you show me last 1 month how many servers were down or how many servers were having problem? So how will you say? So in that case, like I said, internally using the database what we have in Nagios, you can generate a report and you can present it to the management whenever on the need. But other than that, the major important thing what we have is Nagios acts as both monitoring and alerting tool. And by extending Nagios with certain other plugins, you can have so many additional features which can be more into the reporting. Okay, so that is the use of Nagios. So now, once we understand the need of monitoring, the first thing we need to understand is how Nagios works, because we need to understand specifically from the architecture. Then we'll get inside how do we work on Nagios, how do we configure it first. Okay, so like I was saying, the very first thing is you might be having a system which is a Windows based or a Linux based. So it doesn't matter what kind of system you have. So these are your source, or these are the servers on which users will be working and you need to monitor them. Okay, so now in that case, Nagios works in a server and client model, wherein the server is the actual Nagios server which will be doing all the monitoring, and client will be running on these servers on which you need to monitor it. Okay, so as I was saying, you need to first set up a separate Nagios servers which does all the monitoring. Now, how exactly does it monitoring? It is using some set of files or some set of configuration files. So in Nagios, we have a lot of configuration files which is specific to a task. So like I said, now if you have a check to be done, then for that you put some details and put into a configuration file. And now in order to tell that you need to check this server, then you need to put all the details about this server into a config file. Similarly, if you have to check for this server, then you need to put all the details into a config file. So like that, there are couple of configuration files which will be specifying what is the check or what kind of things that you want to check for a server. So based on that, Nagios will always check everything with respect to the details that you have in this configuration files. Okay, so we will go through deep in what are these configuration files that we have, how do you do or how do you write so that Nagios does the check is what we will be seeing it. But internally, this is the first thing which you need to understand is that Nagios uses a group of configuration files through which it will know what it has to do and when it has to do. Okay, fine. Now, once it reads the configuration file which is present, then what it will do is internally it will have a daemon process, or it will have a process which keeps on running every time. Because the first thing when I say monitoring, what comes to your mind is you need to do some check. Okay. Now, how frequently you want to do the check? So that is also important to tell, right? So that doesn't mean that whenever you say to it, it should be doing it. Because when I say a monitoring system, it should be periodically checking it against the time what you have given, and against the server what you have specified. So in that case, those details will also be specified in the config file, saying that you go to this server, and in this server you check this particular service or check at a given interval. Say, I will say every 5 minutes, I want to check whether the server is up and running. Or every 5 minutes, I want to go to the server and check whether memory usage is within this threshold limit. So like that, you specify what check it is and when you have to check within this configuration file. And since in the Nagios server, there will be one process which keeps on running as a daemon. When you say daemon, daemon process means in Linux, generally a background process which keeps running itself automatically, and there is no interaction between the user and this process. Okay, so that is what we call it as daemon. So which will be running it automatically on the background. So now what this daemon would do is it will try to read all the details from the configuration files. So based on that, whatever data that you have specified in the configuration file will be read by the daemon. And now once the daemon reads the details, now it has to do something, right? So what it has to do, the first thing it has to do is it has to go to a server and do some check which you have specified it. Now in order to do that, what the Nagios does is it uses plugin, wherein plugin defines how you have to do some task. Okay, so using this plugin, the daemon process or the Nagios would try to connect to each of the servers which is specified in the configuration file, and how it has to be checked will be taken care by the plugin internally. Okay, so once it connects to the server and does some particular check, what it will do is internally it will take the data what it has been retrieved and it stores in the database what it is present inside the Nagios server. Okay, so like this, periodically this daemon process will take the details from the config file, and using the respective plugin what checks you have to do, it will go to the server, do the check and get back the data and store. So now, as I said, by default, whatever data that has been stored in the database can be viewed using a dashboard which Nagios gives internally. So even with, you don't have to worry about setting up SMS or email and all, but by default, there is a dashboard which is available through which you can try to see what is the status of each server that you have specified in the config file, and what data that it has tried to check through the plugin and what it has written. Okay, so this is the simple setup wherein you can use Nagios to connect to some server, get the data and view the data. Okay, so this is how Nagios generally works. So when we are going through the class, this is what we need to look into, wherein we will be working on how do you write the config files or maintain this so that it does some particular check for a given server. So it is all about maintaining this config files and using different plugins. So in that case, since Nagios is both open source and enterprise version, So there are a lot of plugins which is available in the market. So you can make use of those plugins to do some particular check on a server. In case if you don't want, then still you can write your own script or your own plugin which can do some specific check. Because what happens many times in a company is you might have to do some check which is specific to your company only. So in that case, there might not be a plugin available. Then you can always write a plugin which can help you to achieve the particular check on a server. Okay, fine. So that's the introduction. So before going further, do you have any doubt in what is monitoring or how Nagios work? Any questions?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, Neha.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello? Oh, okay. Why we are using Nagios?
Very good question. So
Sorry,
Nagios,
because I before I was not attending the class.
no, no problem. So here, just in case, for the demo, I'll be using CentOS. Okay, it's a VM that I'll be using. So in case if you don't have VM player installed and if you want to have a separate VM for you, then what you have to do is just try to go here, download the VM player, and once you download the VM player, you can use this ISO image, whatever is present in this place, to create a VM. So I believe you guys know how to create a VM.
Yeah, we can.
Sneha,
Hello?
yeah, do you know how to? Do you have VM player installed at your
Yeah, I
place?
have VM. Yeah, I have VMware.
Okay, good. VMware you
Yeah.
have, right? So in that, you
Yeah,
do one thing.
VM player I have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
download this CentOS
Uh,
ISO
okay.
image so that
Okay.
why I'm saying is I have set up in CentOS. So when you're trying to work,
Okay.
it'll be on the same way so that you don't have to do it anything differently and spend time in debugging the problems. So that is the reason I'm saying try to have CentOS so that we both will be in the same page when we are working.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
the first things what and all is required is there are certain prerequisites which is required. So in that case, in order to work on Nagios, first thing you need to know or what you need to have in your server. That's mean what we are trying to do now is we are trying now to set up Nagios. So like I said, Nagios works on client and server model. So the only thing what we are trying to do is install the Nagios server as the first step. So for the Nagios server to run, we need certain prerequisites. Okay, so in that case, you need to have Apache been running in it. Why we need Apache is because, like I said, once you take the data, in order to publish the data or the reports, you need to have a dashboard, what I said, right? So in order to run that dashboard, we need this Apache service. Okay, so we have to first Okay, so now, as I said, you need to have a Apache service running because for the dashboard to come up, you need a service which has been done using the Apache service. Okay, so that is one of the prerequisite what we need to have, and then we need to have PHP present on the server because the dashboard which you're going to use is based on PHP. Okay, so don't think that we have to work on PHP, it is already present there. So in order to bring that dashboard, we need to have the PHP present. Okay, now other than that, if you see, since we are going to work on the open source Nagios, or we are going to work on Nagios Core, which is open source tool. So the way that Nagios has been set up is something that you don't have it as a binary. Okay, so unlike other tools which you have worked until now, what you have to do is you basically download something, some tar or something you extract, and after that immediately you can work, right? But the only difficulty or the initial glitch which you have in Nagios is Nagios gives you everything as a raw code. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to take this raw code and then compile it against the system what we are using. So that means you will be given all the C code. Basically, it is being written on C internally. So you have to get all the C code. So first, when you download Nagios, you're not downloading the binary of Nagios, but you're just downloading the source code of Nagios. So on based of those source code against your system, whatever operating system that you have working on, then you need to compile and generate the libraries or the binaries using which you're going to execute. So for that, we need to have all the GCC compiler, the GD, which is dependent on the compilation, and then we need to have makefiles because makefile is the build utility using which you will be compiling C files. And supporting that, we need to have Perl also to be present because internally it uses some Perl script also. So these are the things which need to be present in your server before installing and configuring Nagios. Okay, so in that case, how do you get all these things in the very first stage is what is important. So once you install your once you install your VM and bring it up, you need to have all these things present in that. So in order to do that, when you're using CentOS, then you use a packager called yum, using which you can install all this services or packages. So suppose if you're using any other operating system like Fedora or you're using Ubuntu, then instead of yum, you need to use apt-get, apt-get. Okay, so it just varies based on the kind of operating system that you're using. So for all Linux based operating system, that is CentOS is nothing but a flavor of Red Hat. So in that case, you can use yum for all the packages to be installed. So if you just run this command, what it is going to do, it is going to install all these packages on your server on which you're going to work. Okay, so anyways, I have a VM created just some time back. So when you're going to run all this command, please ensure that you are running as root. Okay, so the only thing what you need to do is you need to paste that command in it and start working. Okay, it's not working currently because yeah, I have disabled the
Hmm?
internet here. Okay, it's done. So now what we are trying to do is I'm just trying to install all these packages, whatever is required for compiling our Nagios. So it has already installed everything and there's nothing to worry. So if not, when you're trying to run for the first time, it will take some time wherein it has to install all this particular packages. So once it is installed, you can cross check whether you have everything here. Okay, so you see, I have. Okay, so you almost have everything what is required by installing it here. And once you have installed the prerequisite, then we have to proceed with other things what is required. So the next thing is what we need to do is in order to work on Nagios, generally it is not like you will be always doing everything as root. So instead of doing it as root, you need to have a separate user or you need to have a separate account using which you will be accessing and working on Nagios. Okay, you can still do it with root, but it's just to ensure that you have a separate privileges using one account which can be shared with others. Because if you are the administrator or you are the system administrator, you know the root and you're installing it. But you will not be the one who will be maintaining all these things. So in that case, if there is someone else who have to maintain, you cannot share the root password. So in that case, what you can do is you can create the separate account called Nagios and give this account details to any other person who are managing this particular Nagios server. So like I said, there would be a separate system administrator who's maintaining this server like what you're doing. But being a DevOps engineer, you are going to maintain only this Nagios server. So in that case, you would need to know what is the root password, or even if you don't know, if you just need to have this account, then you can proceed with maintaining the server. So in that case, pretty much the first thing what we need to do is we need to create a user account for Nagios. Okay, fine. So in Linux, if you see how do you create a user is by using a command called user add. Okay, so okay, now if you see, we have created a user called Nagios in this server. So just like this is how a system administrator would be creating any new user who wants to add. Basically, all your login accounts which you try to create, right? Whenever you are trying to work on, this is how your username will be added to the server. Okay, now we have created an account. Then the next thing what we need to do is we have to create a password for this user. Okay, so now when you say that, you can simply say password and Nagios. So it is going to ask you the password for Nagios. So if you want, you can set the same password for that also. So I'll say Nagios itself. Ah,
It's
that,
only warning, not problem.
yeah, I know. So I'm just giving the password as same Nagios itself for the user. Okay, so once that is done, typically in Linux or Unix, we have something called as groups, because every user will be associated to a group, and only through this group you can give permissions on who can access this and how can they can access. So in that case, when you create a user account, they have to be associated to some kind of group. Okay, so in that case, now if you see, Nagios is a separate user, and in order to work on this monitoring using this Nagios, then you have to create a separate group, so that if any user who is added into this group, they might have similar features or permissions just like this user. So in that case, we are going to create a group called Nagios. So the short form for that what we create is nag command. Okay, so this command is going to create a group called nag cmd. Okay, so okay, before that, if you want, I can show you that. You see, now we have created a user account called Nagios. Even you can simply try to get this from etc password. Now etc password is the file where all the user accounts will be stored. Okay, so now you see we have created a user account, but when you run this command, it will tell you what group that this ID is associated. So by default, if you see, it is not associated to any group, because this is the ID which is used to represent this new person or new account, wherein it is going to the default group of the same name. So in that case, there is no separate group associated to it. So now if you try to create a group, so what we are doing is now we are creating a new group called NAGCMD in this server. And once that is done, the next thing what we need to do is we need to assign this group to the user called Nagios, right? So in that case, we use a command called user modification, which is going to say that please add this group called nagcmd to this user called Nagios. Okay, so Okay, now we have added, and now if you run this command id nagios, you see now it is saying that earlier the group of this was only this, whereas now I have added the NAC CMD also to it. Earlier it was not there, wherein now this user called Nagios is part of this group called NAC CMD. So that now any permissions that you give to this group will also be applicable to the member of this group called Nagios. Okay, fine. Now once that is done, if you remember, I said that we need to have the Apache service running so that the dashboard, whatever Nagios is going to give us, has to be accessed and worked. So in that case, who is going to be modifying that Apache services is this user. And since this user is part of NACCMD group, it is also useful that there is a user called Apache which will be used by Apache. Just like Nagios is a username which is used by the Nagios administrator. Similarly, there is a user called Apache or a user account called Apache, which the Apache will be used to running all its application. So in that case, we need to add the Apache also to the group so that it can access the Nagios, and when we are trying to bring up the dashboard for the Nagios, it should be able to work. Okay, so we have added it, and if you want, again you can check Apache for that also. It would have added the group to Apache. Now once this is done, the next thing what we need to do is we need to download the files of the Nagios. So like I said, Nagios comes in the raw set of files, so you have to download Nagios as a core, and then once you download, you have to make sure that you compile and create the libraries specific to which operating system that you're working. Okay, so there are a lot of versions of Nagios core which is available. So for that, what you can do is either you can go to this particular site where Nagios allows you to download. So simply you can go to the site. Hmm, it's not copying. So if you go to this page, you can get the latest version of Nagios, whatever it is available. So from here, you can download to your system. So basically, if you see, it is asking that do you want to download? So if you want, you can download the latest. If not, there is any other specific version that you want, you can pick that also. So in the same way, either you can download it like this, or since you're working on a Linux based operating system, you can use internal downloader called wget. So what this will do is it will fetch the information from a given IP address or from a given web page. So from this the wget, what it can do is it can try to download the file directly, whatever you say, into your local server on which you're working. Okay, so in that case, you need to download two source files. Okay, the first thing is the core Nagios, so that whatever that we are trying to see as an architecture, you need to have. But in addition to this, we also need to download a plugin tar file. Okay, now why do we need plugin is because if you remember some time back, I said Nagios setup is one wherein in that you will be specifying what config file is there, what is the daemon, all those things will be done. But any kind of action that Nagios takes is through this plugin, because only in the plugin we will be defining what is the check we need to do. That would be done against a specific server, right? So in that case, you need to also download this star which has the plugins. So the first tar file will have the Nagios source files, whereas the second tar file what you're going to download will have the Nagios plugin. Okay, so one thing what you need to do is you need to download these two into your server on which you're working. Okay, so let me check if I already have it. Uh, Downloads. Okay, I don't have. Let me check if I have it here. Thank you. Okay, so I have already downloaded those two plugins. So I have this Nagios core and the Nagios plugin. Okay, so simply what I'll do is I'll copy and let me create a directory here. Okay, and then I'll paste, suppose. Let me paste it here. Okay, so I've pasted it here, and so if you see, you have these two files copied to it, right? Now, instead of downloading it, what I've done is we have to waste some time wherein I have to show you how to download. So already downloaded these two. So once you have downloaded these two tar files, then let's proceed with compiling and installing the Nagios in your local server on which you're working. Okay, so the first thing what we need to do is we need to extract the content of those tar files what you have, and once you have, we have to basically start compiling one by one and install it into your local server on which you are working. Okay, so the very first thing what we need to do is let's first extract it. So what we'll do is simply I will create a directory here on the desktop and I'll say Nagios. Okay, and I'll copy both this. Okay, so I have here. So I'll simply first extract the core. Okay, now if you see, once you extract it, you will be getting a folder called Nagios 3.2.3 corresponding to the version what you have. So let's go inside this. Now you have all the source files present here for your Nagios core. Okay, so from here, let's start first compiling the files and then installing whatever you have compiled. Okay, so first thing, before even proceeding with the compilation and installation, you need to first configure based on your operating system what you have currently installed, right? So that what it means is now the options whatever that you're working would be different because you might be working on CentOS, you might be working on licensed Red Hat, or you might be working on Ubuntu, Fedora. Like this, there might be different flavor. So the first thing what we need to do is we need to bring or we need to configure all the commands that we need to run internally or the scripts which we need to compile internally in such a way that is adaptable to the operating system on which you are working, right? So in that case, the very first command that we need to do is run this configure. So what this does is it sets up all the scripts or whatever the files which is needed to run, which will be specific to the operating system on which you are working. So currently we are working on CentOS on a CentOS 7. So when you run this command, it is going to set up all the required details based on that particular operating system. So like this, no matter what kind of operating system that you're using, you always run this command, and this will ensure to set up everything and keep it ready for further use. Because internally, like I said, you will be calling a build utility called make, which is going to do the exact compilation of all the source files what you have just now extracted, and then we are going to start using those libraries which we have compiled. Okay, now we have done. So now whatever it has done is internally it would have created the configuration files and the make file in such a way that it is adaptable to the current operating system on which we are working. Okay, so once that is done, then the next step is you need to compile all the source code. So that is done using the command called make all, wherein make is a build utility and internally it is calling some script wherein all is the target name specifying you compile everything for this particular directory. Okay, so if you see currently it is going to the same directory wherein we have extracted all these files and trying to compile all the files specific to Nagios. So you don't have to worry about all the steps. The only thing is you just have to follow the step by step only for the first time. And typically, when you're working on a production server, someone else would have done it because you will not be focusing more on installation. It is more from the configuration. And in that point, you just have to follow for your demo, wherein you just go through step by step, like what we are doing it now, and you should be able to get the things done properly. Okay, so we have compiled all the source code of for Nagios. Okay, so once that is done, the next thing what you have to do is you have to basically create the libraries what we have done, right? And we have to use it. So now in order to use it, how will you be doing? So what you have to do is you have to put all these files which we have created into a proper structure, which means that in Linux, when you say that, simply, for example, if I said which make, are you accessing it from some directory? Yes. But typically, if you see, it is following a structure. In the same way, when we are installing Nagios, Nagios should be by default accessible from a path. Okay, so what is that path? We still don't know. So that is what Nagios is going to help us by running this command. So when you run all this commands internally, it is going to install whatever compiled files that we have inside this directory. So right now what we have done is by running make all, it has compiled all the C files and it has generated the libraries or the binaries which we have to use. So further thing what we need to do is we need to install Nagios using these files. So when I say install, it is nothing but you already have all the files present inside this directory. So now you have to pick these files here and properly place in such directories so that it looks as if it has been properly installed from external. Okay, so in that case, you have to run a couple of commands wherein the first command is make install. So if you closely watch the output of these, if you have seen, oh, it's not run. It's still running the same. Okay, let me type it. Okay, so if you see what it is doing, it is actually creating a folder called user local Nagios, and this is the folder where Nagios will be installed. So it is creating this directory and then it is trying to give permission with respect to this user and the group. So typically what we are trying to do is we are trying to install Nagios into user local Nagios directory, and copying all the files that we have in our current directory to this place. Okay, so once that is done, the next thing what you have to do is basically you have to do certain initialization and configuration. And also, as I said, you need to have a separate dashboard through which you can publish all the results. For that, we need to do certain install configuration for the web configuration also. So running this command one by one will ensure that you will be able to run Nagios separately. That is because before that we need to install it properly, configure them, and then you can able to connect to Nagios from the command prompt, or you can try to check the output using the web details. So let's run one by one all our steps that we have given here. So the next thing is to run it, and it clearly says that it has run successfully, wherein these are nothing but the scripts which are used to handle the Nagios installation later. Because once you install Nagios, you should need to bring it up or bring it down whenever you need, right? So for that we need to have certain services internally. So those services will be created by running or by this command called make install init. Okay, so once that is done, the next thing is config. Okay, so it has created all the config files. So these files are nothing but, if you remember, in the architecture I was telling you, Nagios uses certain configuration files, right? So by running this step, Nagios is giving us a template for all those configuration files, so using which we can set up all the servers what we need and what configuration checks that we need to do using this template. Okay, so once that is done, the next thing is command mode. Okay, so this ensures that we will be able to run Nagios from the command prompt properly, because when you're trying to run some services, bring it down, or ensure things are working fine, you should be able to run it as a command prompt, right? So that is being done by giving all the permissions properly. And finally, the next thing which we need to do is run this step called webconf. Okay, so now here you're seeing that we are setting up the Apache in such a way that it is also adding our Nagios service also, so that, like I said, the dashboard comes up, so any checks that you do will be shown into the Nagios dashboard. Okay, so pretty much what we have done right now is we have compiled and installed Nagios. Okay, but is this enough? No, we need to do certain more things. Okay, now if you see, we also have to create a account called Nagios admin. This is specifically used so that the dashboard, whatever I was talking so far, can be accessed by this person called Nagios admin. Okay, so in that case, what we need to do is through the Apache, whatever services that we have already created, we are going to create a account called Nagios admin, and the password for that is also Nagios admin. Okay, so by running this command, what you are trying to do is you are trying to create a separate account called Nagios admin for the web interface. So you see, it is actually creating a user called Nagios admin, and the password for that also is Nagios admin. So this is the username and password that you will be using every time you try to log into the dashboard or to the web interface of Nagios. Okay, so once that is done, what we are trying to do is we are trying to restart the HTTPD service or the Apache service, so that whatever new changes that you have done, it will be taken into consideration. Okay, so now by restarting the service, it should have taken this into account. So now what is that we have done until now is we have installed Nagios. That is basically before installed, we have compiled everything, we have installed Nagios, and then we have created a user separately for the web interface. Okay, now once that is done, the next thing, like I said, you need to compile and install the Nagios plugin. Okay, so for that, let's go back. So now where are we? We are in this directory. So now let me extract this Nagios plugin tar file. So you would have got a separate folder corresponding to it. So now let's go inside it. Now we are inside that. So now just like what we did for the core, what we have to do here is we need to compile and install the plugins into the user local Nagios folder. Okay, so before that, let me show you where exactly. So now from the previous step, whatever we did, right? So I'm just switching as root. Okay, so now if you go to user local Nagios, you see it has installed. So this is what we did earlier when we went into the Nagios core folder, compile, and we did that, right? Make all, make install, all those things that has done here. And now when you go inside the bin folder, you see this is the Nagios binary internally, which it uses to run all the services. Okay, now here we have a folder called libexe. Okay, now this is the folder where you should be having all the plugins internally. When you are saying Nagios to do some check, it uses a plugin. So from which directory it will use the plugin? It is from this directory. So now here,
That's it.
okay, so where did I stop? Yeah, so as I was saying, when you run Nagios, it will be checking for this folder from where it will be trying to get all the plugins and run. So when we are going to install, I mean that is compile and install the Nagios plugin folder, whatever we have here. So once you do a install, it will be copying all those libraries that it will be creating here, that would be copied to this particular folder. So when you say install from this Nagios plugin, internally it means you put all the files into this folder called libexe. Okay, so now let's try doing it so that we'll see the output inside this folder later. So first thing is, what we have to do is once you go inside this folder, you need to compile it. And even before compiling, the first thing is, like I said, you need to configure what and all steps you have to do specific to the operating system which you are currently using, right? So in that case, now let's try to configure that. So let me just make sure it is clear. Okay, so what this step does is this will ensure that whatever further compilation step and installation step you have to do, that will be done specific to the operating system what you're going to work on. So it is running all the commands and it checks whatever is needed for that particular plugin to be compiled and installed. Hmm, it's taking a long time.
Very big dependencies.
Okay, it has done at last. So what it has done until now is it is generating all the configuration files. So once this is done, the next step what we need to do is you need to compile everything, right? So simply here you call make. So once you run, it is going to compile all the source code what you have inside the plugin folder using the configuration files it has created. Okay, this shouldn't take much time. Okay, so it has completed compiling all the source code. Now, once you have done, the next thing what you need to do is you need to install these files. So like I said, when you say install, that is make install, what it does is it basically has all the files which has been compiled here. It will copy and it will install inside your libexe folder. So see now, it has compiled and installed all these plugins. So these are nothing but plugins which are used for specific check. Okay, so all these plugins can be used internally by us to perform some particular check. For example, if you want to check whether a server is pingable or not, you will be using this plugin. And if you want to get the time, you will be using, suppose if you want to connect through SSH to a different server, then you will use this. So like this, there are so many plugins that is by default Nagios gives us, which we can use to perform a check. But anything other than that, if you want to use, you can still download and put into the same folder and work. Okay, fine. So now what we have done until now is we have compiled the Nagios plugin and we have installed. Okay, so once this is done, like I said, Nagios runs everything using the configuration file. Okay, so there are a lot of template files which is available. By now, if you see, we have not done anything. So just to ensure that whatever configuration files that you have created is fine completely, you run this command. Oh no, what did I do? It is still running the same old. Huh. It's configuring it once again. Okay, forget about this because I reran the configure command. It's not going to do anything. So now by running this command, what we are trying to do is there are certain configuration files. So you are ensuring that all this configuration files, syntax and everything is fine as it is needed by the Nagios to run. Okay, so once you run, it says that everything is fine. Then now Nagios is ready to use. Okay, suppose once we go with the next class, we will be trying to modify the configuration files. So in case if you have done any mistake, in order to ensure, first you run this command. This will verify by going through all the configuration files, and in case if you have done any mistake, then it will clearly tell, because in case if Nagios is not coming up, right, this is what the first thing you need to do to ensure that you have all the configuration files used properly. Okay, and now once this much has been done, the next thing what we need to do is we need to bring the Nagios server. Okay, sorry. Okay, so for now, if you see, it has bring the Nagios service. So if you want to cross check, you can just simply search for the process called Nagios. And here, if you see, it is running Nagios internally. And basically, it will be using a file called CFG. That is where all the configurations will be done. Okay, so once you have done by this step, what we have ensured is we have configured Nagios and we have installed Nagios properly. Okay, and after that, like you said, we need to bring up the process. So if you want, if you're using any older versions of Nagios, then what you need to do is you can add Nagios by default to the operating system services. So just like the scheduler, every time you reboot the server, the Nagios service can also be restarted along with the servers. So in order to do that, you just simply have to run these three commands. So what this will do is this will ensure that Nagios is added to your operating system services by default, so that whenever you reboot your server, your Nagios will come up. So in case if you don't want to do, then like I said, you can run service Nagios start to bring it up, or it depends on what kind of operating system that you work. Some cases services will not work, then you simply use this command called systemctl start nagios.service. Okay, so pretty much any of these two can be run, so that will ensure that Nagios is running. Okay, so by now you should have been installed and you should have got this user local Nagios. Okay, so this is what first thing which you have to do. Okay, now how do I ensure whether Nagios is installed or running? So what you can do is you can simply run this, because now as I said, when you are bringing up the services here, there is a web page which through which you can get the details of Nagios, or the dashboard I was talking, right? So that can be accessed using this Nagios directory, wherein localhost is nothing but the server on which we have installed Nagios. So I'm trying to access the Nagios directly from that. So it is asking us a web interface, and for this web interface, if you remember here,
Nagios admin.
exactly. So at this step, we had created a username and password called Nagios admin and Nagios admin. That is what we need to give. Okay, so I'll say remember password. So now if you see, it is bringing up the Nagios dashboard. All right. So that means until now, whatever we have done with Nagios is fine. That means we have configured and we have installed Nagios properly. All right. So in the next class, what we will do is we will pretty much see how do we configure specifically for each of the checks, how do you modify it, and how do you see all those output in the dashboard here so that we can use it. Okay, so other than that, any specific doubts in what we saw